When you begin your glaze, you should generally use a brush that is soft and supple so that you can apply your glaze more smoothly and evenly. To create a homogeneous mixture, make sure that you mix your paint with a liberal serving of your medium. I like to use a medium made of a mixture of Galcid, Gamsol, and walnut oil, but pure Galcid works just fine. I like to begin by covering the image with one cohesive layer of paint, which will unify the surface. I can then add other colors or remove as needed with a cotton rag. In this instance, I add a purple, which is cool, to the red and orange coat, which is warm, and that will allow me to build up some diversity of color temperature within this layer. When you use a dry brush technique, you should use a coarse bristle brush. For my second layer of scumble, I will be using the dry brush technique, which I will accomplish by removing the moisture from the paint mixture, but retaining pigment at the edge of the brush. When the brush is prepared, I will slightly kiss the surface of the painting with the edge of the brush. The coarse bristle brush can effectively create scratchy marks, which are very valuable in creating the texture of hair. You can dry brush over patches of hair to quickly create this texture in your scumble layer, and then glaze over those areas to create a variety of hair colors. By highlighting a few hairs towards the surface of the hair, you can more easily give the impression and texture of hair without trying to paint every single hair. If you accidentally use too much pigment in the application of your mark, simply wipe it off with a rag, or continue to work it into the surface, thus thinning the paint application. This will create a very thin layer of paint, which can at times give a cloudy appearance. For this reason, you typically don't want the scumble layer to be the final layer of the painting, since the cloudiness will disappear once you've glazed on top of it. It is important to note that you can scumble and glaze within the same layer. You should just be careful not to scumble and glaze in the same area. Sometimes it is essential to do this so that you can make the best use of your time. Try to think about your paint applications fourth dimensionally. This means that you are more concerned with what the painting will look like after several applications of paint and less concerned with how it will look within the context of each individual layer. To do this, always consider what will be applied after the layer that you're currently working on while you're in the act of painting. This is very difficult at first, but it gets easier the more that you practice. For example, if I have used too much reds in my glazes, I will consider applying more yellow glazes after my next scumble to balance the colors. This strategy will guide how I approach my scumble layer. As you continue to work into your scumble, adjust brush sizes so that you can create smaller details, and make sure that you look for any areas that might have become too warm or too dark. Remember that the scumble will always make the painting brighter and cooler. If you want to make an area cooler but not lighter, you can apply an extremely thin scumble layer that will barely affect the value. If you want to make an area lighter but not cooler, then guess what? You can't always get what you want. But if you try sometimes, you might find that you get what you need. Simply make the area lighter with your scumble and glaze over it with the appropriate color. If you are using a rag to remove your paint, make sure that you are using a 100% cotton rag. If you use a polycotton blend, it can leave behind a lot of unsightly debris because the solvents in the medium can break down the polyurethane and leave you with little balls of grossness all over your painting. The best thing to do is to find a shirt or a pair of underwear that is 100% cotton and just use that as your rag. Although, if you are using your old undies, I wouldn't bring that to school because you will be mocked and everyone will judge you. By wiping away a glaze, you can allow a very thin layer of paint to remain on the surface, a layer that is nearly invisible, but still influences the color and temperature of the image. This subtle application of paint broadens the visual depth of the overall piece. Make sure that each layer of paint has thoroughly dried before moving on to the next step. To do this, you typically want to wait at least 24 hours, but some pigments and mediums dry at vastly different rates. You should always check the surface before you begin, and you can speed the drying time by using a dehumidifier. The concept of fat over lean is something that you may have heard about, and while it is really good advice, when we use modern alkyd-based mediums like Galcid or Liquin, this advice is far less necessary to the process. To explain, the thinking is that the surface of the painting is more stable if it's built up in the proper way. The proper way in this case is to begin your painting using a lean paint film and build on top of that using more and more fat. If you think about your medium as an oil, and then think about oil as a fat, then this means that you continue into the painting using more and more medium. And when you start the painting, you use little to no medium. Many painters will create their underpainting by diluting their paint with mineral spirits or turpentine. By using a paint film that is thinned with mineral spirits or turpentine, you create an extremely lean paint film, which is really only appropriate for the base layer. All subsequent layers of glaze and scumble will be more and more fatty, leading to a more stable surface. The modern mediums allow us a little more freedom to veer away from this process if we are so inclined. However, it is still a valuable concept to use when building up a painting surface.